Hi, in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to help you to understand and think more clearly about buying cheap or free. Hi, it's Tom and welcome to this week's Thrive in 5. This week we want to talk a little bit about the real cost of cheap or free. And I want to talk to you about this because on a regular basis, one of the things I hear from people is the after effects of buying cheap or trying to get something for free. And I think sometimes we don't recognize the long-term cost of cheap or free. And so I want to describe it and help you understand how to think through when you're getting something cheap or for free, what's the residual implication of this? You've undoubtedly seen the cartoon that is really, it's two sides of the street, it's two barbershops, and on the one side of the street, the sign in the window of the barbershop reads $5 haircuts. On the barbershop on the other side of the street, you actually see the sign that says, "We fix $5 haircuts." And really, why I remind you of that is because a lot of times when you get a $5 haircut, you end up with problems. Your hair doesn't look good. And I've tried my share of $5 haircuts and I've got rough hair to begin with. But what I've discovered is I need to pay enough to get somebody who knows how to work with this in order to get the result I'm looking for. So as we think about that, I really want you to think about investment in terms of not so much is it free or cheap, or is it a lot of money, or is it really expensive, but how does what I'm investing or what I'm paying for this relate to the high or low value that I'm trying to get from it. So when you think about something, you start on the continuum of free, and then you go to cheap, and then you go to mid-price, and then you go to a lot, and then you go to expensive. But all of those really connect with and have to be sort of funneled through this whole understanding of what's the perceived value of that which I'm investing in. So if I'm spending a lot of money on wine, let's say, what's the value to me in that? Well, there's no more wine in an expensive bottle of wine than in a cheap bottle of wine. But what's the value that's actually derived from that? It oftentimes tastes better. There's a lot of times you can tell a story about it, where you got it, how you bought it, just the ability and pride of being able to buy an expensive bottle of wine, or a car, same thing. I mean, one car will get you to the same place another car will, but an expensive car might deliver a different set of value to you than a cheaper car might. So it's really important to understand that the cost that what you're willing to spend is also connected to the value you're expecting from what you're spending, or the perceived value of that. But I think sometimes that's the logical process we go through in our heads. But often what's missed when we tend to come down this end of the spectrum, the cost spectrum, is we forget that there's a present cost and there's a future cost. And we often think of things in terms of what's it costing me now, but we neglect to think of what it's going to cost me in the future. So while you might get a $5 haircut, then you're going to pay $15 here to get it fixed. So essentially the real cost, the future cost of that one haircut is $20, not $5. And I think sometimes it's easy to buy the $5 haircut and not factor in the cost of fixing, the cost of repair, the cost of maintenance, the cost of improvements, because we've been so enamored by the price in this very simplistic model. Years ago, I got a phone call from one of the telemarketers, and they said, "We're going to send you a free newspaper." And it happened to be around the holiday time of the year, and they kept saying, "We'll give you a free newspaper." And I said, "I don't want a free newspaper." But they said, "But it's free." And I said, I know it's free, but I have to figure out a way every day to take that paper and get rid of it. So those newspapers that come from the large city newspapers that give them away for free are huge. You got to deal with them. They show up. If you don't read them today, there's another one. And before too long, you got this big pile of newspapers. So you got to get rid of it. So really, despite the fact that it's free, my cost and my investment is I've got to do something with it to actually deal with it, even if I don't read it. So there is costs involved. I hear a lot of people, because of the work I do in helping people with marketing, I hear a lot of people talk about getting free marketing. Well, SEO is free marketing, and there's these other things that are apparently free marketing. But what they fail to factor in is not just the cost, but the cost and the future costs of people being involved, what the implications are, how much time is spent. Time is money, and so the cost of that is not adequately factored. People often want a cheap fix. So, oh, I just need a cheap fix. Well, what's the cost of that cheap fix? You can get a cheap fix in plumbing and then have future costs related to clearing the mud and muck out of your house at some point. People like to go for cheap labor, but cheap labor has its own costs associated with it. So I hope you get this sense. Don't always go for something because it's cheap or free. Look at not just what the present cost is, but what the potential future cost is. And one of the things I try and do is run it through a series of 3 questions for myself. The first one is my value expectation clear? So when I tend to get enamored with low price stuff, with $5 haircuts, do I understand the value I'm looking for? So do I have a very low perceived value? So sometimes if I'm just hungry and I want to spend money on something, I'm willing to spend cheaper just to fill my tummy for a moment. That might be a low perceived value. But if I want to look really good, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So if my expectation is I want my hair to look great, I need to be cautious about making this choice. So is my value expectation clear? Am I clear with myself about the value I'm looking for in this investment? Secondly, do I realize the future costs? And so if there is no inherent future cost, not a big deal. But if you're willing to spend a little bit of time, and this is generally more important, the more expensive a kind of investment you're going to make, is really important to understand your future costs on something. So my car, when I buy it, I get the first 36,000 miles. I don't pay for any service. But if sometimes I actually buy a cheaper car, I might have to pay for the service the whole way along. So understand your future costs and understand the implications of if this is not built right, what's it cost me there? What's it cost me on fix it? What's it cost me on time? All of those things have to be factored in. And then finally, is free or cheap really worth it? And in many cases, I'm not discounting that you can't buy stuff cheap or free or get stuff cheap or free, but there's always something that you need to be aware of. And ultimately, is it worth it? Is the real cost of cheap or free worth it in your particular situation, given present costs, future costs, value proposition that's delivered with that investment, and how much you actually have to pay today? I hope that helps. We'll talk to you next time.